Hey folks, how are you? I'm going to talk about each of these champions of change, but I also want you to meet what we're referring to as the influencers. This group over here you've seen on YouTube, you've seen on the internet. 40 million of you and Americans and around the world watch what they do. And these folks have stepped up and are fighting to help promote this whole effort of It's On Us. So I wanted to publicly thank them all. I'm not going to ask everybody to stand here. You don't have to. You can go get a seat. But I just wanted you to see not only the champions of change, but these guys are champions of change. They're having the nerve to stand up and tell the entire community at home and abroad, hey man, enough is enough is enough. So thank you all very much. Why don't you go get a seat? Thank you. Watch your step. Folks, look, Lisa, first of all, thank you for the introduction. It doesn't make me feel old that you were not born when I wrote the law. I just wasn't thinking about this. Lisa flew all the way from South Africa, where she's studying abroad this semester to be here today. And I want to thank you whoever financed your trip, because it's a lot. It's a long way, and it's an expense. And you do us a great honor, Lisa, being here today. You know, what you saw standing behind me today represents, and with all of you, you wouldn't be here, my guess is, represents a lot of passion. And Lisa is producing a documentary on her experience, the experience of African American women who are sexual assault survivors at Howard, and it's powerful. It's powerful. Hope you're all going to get a chance to see it. Lisa and all the champions of change here today, we owe you. My 4 granddaughters, 1 who's graduated from college and 3 who aren't there yet, owe you. Owe you. Every young woman in America owes you for calling attention to what is a scourge. Folks, last week, Matt and I went to Pitt and then at UNLV for an It's On Us event. I think there were 1,500 students at that one. Then we went to UNLV, and I went with Lady Gaga, who's become a friend and is deeply engaged in this for real. She means it. It's not a publicity piece. It's if you heard her rendition of "Till It Happens to You," you'll have no doubt about how deeply, deeply, deeply she feels it and how she has suffered as a consequence of being abused, by an individual on campus. I'm not sure it's on campus, but being abused by an individual when she was college age. And at the University of Colorado in Boulder, there were close to 3,000 students, if memory serves me correctly, and Damon Johns on Shark Tank. Shark Tank was along because, by the way, he's experienced with his family the abuse that has taken place against women in his life. I've traveled to colleges all across the country, from the Northeast to the Southwest. I've been to everywhere from the Naval Academy, where I met Shaq, Morehouse, Spelman College, where I met, anyway, I won't go through it all. Clemson, where I met Joey Wilson, my alma mater, Syracuse, Samantha Scaler, Ohio State, Ohio University and Ohio State. I'll get in trouble for that. University of Illinois, just all over the country. And I went for a simple, straightforward reason. Nothing complicated about it. I believe that we have an opportunity, if we commit ourselves, to do nothing short of changing the culture as it relates to how women are treated not only overall, but on college campuses and in high schools. I, honest to God, believe we can change the culture. You know, when I wrote the Violence Against Women Act, I was absolutely certain, even though it had been tried before, to focus on this. I was absolutely certain that the American people would respond if it became culturally permissible to respond. That sounds strange when you think about it. But at the time I wrote the legislation, no one would support it. Not a single women's group in America would support it. Not a single civil rights group would support it. Seriously, I know it sounds bizarre. Because they were worried it would take the focus off of choice or gender equality or other issues. Legitimate concern on their part, but not legitimate to stand back. Finally, when a woman who was the founder of NOW came along named Ellie Schmiel said, "What are we doing?" and she endorsed, everything started to come in place. And I knew what I wanted to do because I literally wrote it myself. It wasn't like I had a committee to sit and write it with me. One of the things I really misunderstood, I thought if I wrote a law that was strong enough that would provide more physical protection, police protection, help once abused, medical help, housing, etc., that would be the thing that would really make a difference. But it wasn't until, and the way I was convinced we could change attitudes was to pull back the mask on this dirty little secret that everybody knew was going on, but no one wanted to admit. No one was like, I don't want to deal with that. Too complicated. Too complicated. Well, when he grabbed her and he bent her wrist and she went down, that was just, well, he didn't really mean that, and maybe she said something that made him angry. Or when a husband smacked the wife because dinner wasn't on the table. I was told it was a family affair. Literally. Go back, as my wife as a professor says, Google it. Go back and look. Biden's Violence Against Women Act was attacked by conservative elements, religious as well as cultural, because I was interfering in the family. I hate the phrase domestic violence because it makes it sound like a domesticated cat. It's the ugliest, ugliest, ugliest form of violence there is. When a woman is abused, or a man, by husband, wife, lover, or someone they knew, an acquaintance, it's the most difficult to recover from. Not just physically, psychologically. Because all the psychiatric studies show, the woman said, well, what did I do to make him think he could do that? What? And so I started the hearings. And I had two really, and I'm not being solicitous when I say this, truly courageous young women who were among the first to testify. And I briefed them way ahead of time. Don't move that at all, guys. I briefed them ahead of time because I knew they would be tried in the court of public opinion when they testified. Too many women were raped by an individual, then raped by the system. And so there was a lovely young woman named Marla Hanson. You all are too young to remember, but your parents would. This was 23 years ago. She was a model in New York City. A beautiful person, as a person, bright as hell, and also a beautiful model. And she lived in an upscale not an upscale, a first-rate apartment complex in Manhattan. Nothing down and out about where it was. And on the first floor of that apartment building, like many places in Manhattan, Chicago, Philadelphia, New York, Los Angeles, it had a restaurant bar. And she had an efficiency, and she wanted a one-bedroom apartment. And every time she'd go to speak to her landlord, he'd hit on her, be suggestive. She decided she was going to get the hell out of there. She was on location. This was her testimony. She was on location, and she got a phone call saying that he had a one-bedroom apartment. And if she stopped in the restaurant bar downstairs on the way up to her apartment, she could sign a new lease. And so she did. Stop. But he hit on her again. She got up to leave. And as she did, this coward, this thug, had hired two guys with razors, straight razors, to slash her face, which they did when she walked out. I remember asking her, preparing her ahead of time, knowing, so she wasn't surprised. What did your mom say? She asked me, why was I in a bar? What did your girlfriend say? Were you wearing a bra? How short was your skirt? What did you say to provoke him? That's when I realized that we had to do more than provide protection. We had to change our culture, change the way we think and talk about women and girls. How many of you know the derivation of the phrase rule of thumb? Raise your hand. You're much more than most audiences. It's part of our culture. Since the press is here, I'll repeat it. I apologize for you having to hear it. In the late 1300s, too many women were dying at the hands of their husband because husbands were allowed to chastise their wives because they were property. They were a chattel, no different than the dog in the front yard or the horse in the stable. And too many were dying. So the English common law, those of you lawyers know that we developed our law. It wasn't a codification of a code like in France. It was developed over time in the courts. And what developed was a man could not beat a woman with a rod thicker than the circumference of his thumb. Western civilization. We know about honor killings that are horrible, genital mutilation, and other things that go on in other cultures. But it's imbued in our culture. So we have to change the culture. And that's when I was very proud of the fact that after we wrote the Violence Against Women Act, I wrote it, we passed it. Violence against women dropped over the last 20 years, 60-some%. And more women reporting. All good. The one thing I asked the president when I became vice president, he said, is there any particular thing you want? And I said, yeah, I wanted to maintain control over the Violence Against Women's office. I wanted to bring it in for the first time into the vice president's office, out of the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General still does the prosecuting, but I wanted to be able to name the people who ran the departments. And he happily did that, as did the Attorney General's support with the last one and this one. So I've had a number of great women run that show for me. There have been 4. 3 of them are formerly of my staff on the Judiciary Committee. One is a woman named Cynthia Hogan, really bright, strong woman. Remember when Rice is the guy, the pro football player, dragged his wife out of the elevator by the hair? The NFL realized they had to get their act together. So they hired Cynthia. She left me, went over there to begin to get their game in shape. By the way, had that happened 10 years ago, nothing would have happened. So things are changing. So I said to Cynthia, I said, check what she would do every year with the Bureau of Justice Statistics to tell me how we're doing. And she came back with the most discouraging news I've received as a U.S. Senator or as Vice President. She said, we're getting better everywhere except girls between 14 and 24. When you wrote the law, 1 in 4 of them were being raped or abused on a college campus. The number hadn't changed at all. And then it was in 18 years, now 22 years. So I went to the president. That's when we started with Tina Chin, who runs the Office of Women and Girls here, a program called It's on Us. Because what I did was, after we did that, I did virtual town meetings with I don't know how many, hundreds, thousands of young women on college campuses and some young men and high school campuses. And I asked the question, please let me know what 1 or 2 things you think we could do to make it safer for you in your high school or on your campus. I expected I'd get legitimate things like, better lighting in parking garages, more lighting on campuses, more police escorts, campus police from the library to my dorm, etc. You know what I got back more than anything? Get boys and men involved. And I felt foolish because why had I not focused on that more? So that's when we started the program, It's on Us. That's why all these folks up against the wall over here who are viewed by millions of people a year, and some of the equally famous actors and actresses doing public service announcement, the NCAA and all range of sports organizations doing to call to attention the young men in America what constitutes being a man. What constitutes appropriate behavior? Those of you gone to college, my guess is most all of you have. Some of you guys and all of you women, when you got dropped off of that curb at college by your mom and dad, they had exceedingly high hopes for you. That you do well academically, learn a great deal, be empowered intellectually. But they also, every one of them, go back and ask them, if you think I'm exaggerating, had this nagging fear in the back of their mind. Will she be okay? Not a joke. Will she be okay? Because although they didn't know the statistics, most, they know. They know. That everything from binge drinking to flat stranger rape generates excuses and rationales as to why it's okay for a man to lay a hand on a woman without her consent or without her ability to give consent. I've got a goal, and I mean this with every fiber of my being. And when I leave this office, I'm setting up a foundation to continue this. I've got a goal, and I believe it can be met. And within your generation, we reach the point, although we'll never end violence overall, when you drop off your daughter or vulnerable son, and homosexual rape is real on campuses, But you're not going to have that nagging worry in the back of your mind. Is my daughter or son 1 in 4, 1 in 5? And if she's transgender, does she have a 38% chance? Or, excuse me, 24%, or bisexual, a 30-some% chance of being the victim of abuse? So, folks, I'm here to thank every one of you, particularly the Champions of Change, for us being able to get a little bit closer to the goal. I'm often asked, why am I so passionate about this? They think that maybe, God forbid, my mom was abused, or my sister, or my deceased wife, or my wife. I was passionate about this because I was raised by a truly graceful man who never raised his hand to any one of his children or anybody I'm aware of. He was a big man. Who'd have thought and would talk about not one of my siblings or any of our friends, and everybody hung out at our house, would not be able to repeat my father's mantra. The greatest sin of all sins is the abuse of power, and the cardinal sin among those is for a man to raise his hand to a woman or a child, someone physically weaker. That's why I wrote the Violence Against Women Act. We held thousands of hours of hearings, issued a report the day in the life of. We actually went out and took actual cases, 365 days, and put an actual case on a big report we did, this big, the pages, 8.5 by 11, with what some actual case that happened that day, that year. For people no longer to be able to go, well, you know, I don't know. As I said, we held hundreds of hours of testimony, advocates, experts, health professionals, opponents, as I said, survivors. That's when, as I said, not only I, but the public began to realize we got to do something about the culture here. We have to do something profound to change how we think about these things. And so, folks, as I said, we have made some progress. Since the President and I started this program, It's on Us, over 350 people literally raised their right hand and taken an oath. And if I see it, I'll do something about it. If consent is not or cannot be given, it is a crime. A definition of what constitutes lack of permission, whether it's in a bedroom, a ballroom, on a campus green. No means no, no matter when it is stated. Even in bed and you change your mind, no means no. Anything that follows after that is a crime. So, the next piece that's happened, and you all are so important in this effort, is no also means no when you can't give consent. So as I say in college campuses, you see a fraternity brother walking a drunk co-ed up the stairs. Have the guts, have the gumption to walk over and say, hey, Jack, not on my watch. Not on my watch. You gotta look at this like if it were your mother, your sister, your younger, vulnerable brother. What would you do? It takes a lot of courage. I'm not expecting everybody to be able to do what some of these incredible folks have gone out and done. But I do think that and know everyone can do something. Just holler. Step away so no one sees you. Scream if you're worried, and you have sometimes legitimate worry that there'll be reprisals against you. But everybody can do something. There's a recent film being done by a woman in South Africa who has the same kind of program. She shows a woman being raped, and there were 7 occasions when if somebody just said something, it would have stopped, it would have ended, without intervening physically. From being pulled to a car, to being taken by a doorman, and being dragged in an elevator. It doesn't require heroics. And by the way, it's not just men. I'll end this. Women abused on a campus, only 2.5% go to the authorities on the campus, and only fewer than 1%, I think it is, a little less than 1.25%, report to police. 65 or 67, don't hold me to the precise number, but over 65% tell their roommate, their girlfriend, their sorority sister, their teammate. So you women have an obligation to say something, to find them help. Find out where the help is available. As I say in campuses, when I was going to law school, there was a movie called The Paper Chase by E.A. Houseman, who was the star. And there's a line in it where he says, "Gentlemen, look to your left and look to your right, and one of you will not be here next semester." Don't look to your left. Don't look to your right. Look in the mirror. Look in the mirror and ask yourself, am I doing everything I can? I don't have to be Crusader Rabbit. I don't have to be the person who's going to change the world. But am I doing everything I can to change this culture? You know, we have a great Secretary of Education now. We had a truly great Secretary of Education. The guy's become my really close friend. Great basketball player at Harvard. I think it was Harvard he went to. Then he played basketball, the pros in Australia. Australia. His name was Arnie Duncan. He was Secretary of Education. And Arnie, with the encouragement of the president and me, came up with an idea. You know, we give tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to universities to maintain their campuses and their students. All the student aid you get, all the direct assistance. We have a thing called Title IX. And you don't get that aid unless you are started off in terms of sports, having equal opportunity for women. So guess what? We took a look at it and had our lawyers look at it. Now we're saying, guess what, universities? If you don't have a system that demonstrates you are looking out for the physical safety and the mental health after, God forbid, something happens, of your students and acting, we will deny you tens of millions of dollars in aid. You know, we have 172 national universities under investigation right now. You read about it every day. I'm not going to name any particular university because the cases aren't adjudicated. Some of the schools you went to, go back and ask, what reporting system do they have? How much do they encourage women to come forward? When they come forward, are they going to speak to a professional as if you showed up at a rape crisis center, or if you showed up to a professional on the civil side? We have horrible cases of college, universities, and presidents' offices asking, what were you wearing? How much did you have to drink? not what happened to you, where did it happen. It doesn't mean we eliminate the presumption of innocence. They can never do that in America. But all these should be taken seriously. You realize more women drop out of college because of sexual abuse than there any other reason? So the point is, we're going to keep it up the remainder of our term here, but we need to engage you all. Because, folks, once all universities start reporting, one of the things we're considering doing is insisting that, it's not done yet, insisting all universities do climate surveys anonymously, so they can't pretend they don't know what's happening on their campus. Every student fill out a form if they choose to. Have they been abused? Do they know someone who's been abused? If they're abused, where were they abused? There's 1,000 things we can do. And just like in domestic violence overall dropping 64%, we can begin to change what's happening on campuses. You know, there's an old Chinese proverb, and it goes like this. It says that women hold up half the sky. Women hold up half the sky. All kinds of studies. If as many women were employed, not even at equal pay, as men worldwide, the international GDP would increase by $27 trillion. President and I are pushing hard for tripling the child care tax credit and two-wage earner $500 tax credit. That'll put 500,000 more women in the workplace, significantly increasing our GDP. My generic point is, you don't have to think of it just in how much money averted cost to the public we have averted with the Violence Against Women Act. Every study points out $12.6 billion a year in averted social cost, medical bills, cost associated with loss of productivity in the workplace. Even though I said it 22 years ago, I couldn't prove it, but I can prove it now. The CCD in Atlanta, the Center for Disease Control, has done a survey, extensive survey. Women who have been abused suffer from long-term immune system compromises, heart disease, diabetes, post-traumatic stress. For a guy who comes home, you're married to him for 10 years, and every night you're slightly off or he doesn't like the meal on the table and he smashes your head against the wall. There's no different than that in the military, you being held and someone coming into your cell every night and smashing your head against the wall. My generic point is here, we've got to change the situation on campuses, because we are not only is the morally right thing to do, we're wasting an enormous resource to make us better, stronger, and more capable. So the champions of change here, and I'm going to ask each one of them to stand up. As a matter of fact, I'm going to embarrass them and ask them each to walk up on the stage with me I'll be very brief. Okay? Jessica Davidson, University of Denver. She had the courage to challenge the university to adopt clear affirmative consent policies. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want, right?
Yeah.
Am I exaggerating?
No.
Okay. She's a survivor, and with the bravery, and it's not hyperbole, the bravery to tell her story You're making a difference, kiddo.
Thank you.
With an awful lot of young women all across the country. And it was great to see you in Boulder last week. And that's where I met Matt, who handles the Buffalo, who pulled a guy off a young woman and had the courage to do it. Also, Valerie Halstead, University of Miami. Valerie, come on up. If there are any angels in heaven, by the way, having been a great consumer of health care and spending 7 months in the hospital and 2 in ICU and losing wives and children in hospitals, they're nurses. Doctors make you live, but nurses, I'm serious, you're the single most underestimated profession in the world. You change people's lives in terms of their attitudes, and that makes a difference. Valerie, making sure campus health centers, because a lot of campus health centers you go to, they're not equipped or prepared to deal with the psychological. You may come in and they'll send you to a hospital. Most don't have rape kits. Most don't have. Well, guess what she's doing? She is helping schools come up with a standardized procedure whereby you have at the school infirmary qualified people to deal with the problem. My mother would say, was your God love you, kid. You're doing God's work. Also, we have Milena Hassman. Am I pronouncing it right? Hasmanis. Hasmanis. You can call me Joe Biden. Come here.
A for effort.
Come here. I tell you what. Well, you're getting A for effort. Look, talk about taking on a tough charge. She's at Grand Valley State. She is confronting, maybe not confronting, engaging the Greek community for the on-campus to step up. Because there is an awful lot of evidence, not because anybody belongs to fraternities per se bad, but because the nature of it being either off campus or out of sight, and the drinking that goes on, an awful lot of young women are victimized. Thank you for making them look in the mirror. It's important. Appreciate it. Also, we have Claire Kelling, Virginia Tech, a PhD in statistics, or she's about to be. She has a brilliant mind as big as her heart, and she's figuring out how data and analytics. I'm serious. This stuff makes a difference. How data and analytics can help us find patterns. Patterns. It doesn't mean it provides for a rationale of guilt or innocence in a court of law, because you can't convict on a pattern. You got to convict on showing specific intent. But patterns as to where, how, what circumstances these situations occur to solve what is basically an epidemic. Same thing they're doing in cancer research, same thing they're doing in astronomy, establishing the patterns. I tell you what, I wish I was as bright as you were, and because I did done even better job than I've done before. But thank you for what you're doing, kiddo.
Thank
and
you.
Stay with it. Stay with it. Also, we have Celine Lopez. Celine Lopez at Humboldt State. She had the courage to ask some pretty tough questions to her dog. And by the way, her dog answers. I just want you to know her dog speaks like mine. If you're not a dog lover, you won't quite understand what we mean, but both our dogs talk. But at any rate, she had the courage to ask some really tough questions to change the conversation on our campus about what constitutes consent. Uncomfortable conversation to have. Literally, to actually put up posters on campus and begin a discussion. What constitutes consent? Because, by the way, 10 years ago, that was just private. No one wanted to talk about that. Because you got to educate young men, even the ones who aren't bad guys. I really mean it, and most aren't. What constitutes consent? Thank you, kiddo. Also, we have Megan Yap, the University of California at San Diego. When I die, that's where I want to be reborn. I love San Diego. I was speaking at the University of California at San Diego. are at, is it Nazarene College is up the road from there?
It's close by.
Yeah. I was speaking at Nazarene College after speaking at your college years ago, and I was in an amphitheater, a natural amphitheater, and all the students were sitting on a hill, and the ocean was behind them. And below that, I later learned was Black's Beach. But at any rate, so I'm standing, I'm talking to all the students, and there are about 300 of them, and they're going like this, looking over my head. And next thing I know, 3 people glide over about 10 feet over my head in kites. Only in San Diego would that happen. Absolutely. It wasn't like, hey, there's Charlie. It was like, well, keep talking. Anyway, Megan she's an EMT, and she literally is on the front lines of caring for victims. She sees the look of fear in their eyes. She sees the damage that's been done. And it's not, it's hard. It ain't easy. And when you see it, and the compassion and empathy you brought, you're studying campus sexual assault policies all across the country, and your intent is to hold schools accountable by making sure they have certain basic standards. Thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing. And 3 of our honorees are men who have been leading the way of getting men involved in at their universities or former universities. Pablo Dawes, Boston University. He has some steel in his backbone and trying to get the fraternities and athletes involved. And that first conversation, you walk in the locker room, hey guys, I got a great idea. They say, what are you talking about, man? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, okay.
Precisely.
Well, it's changing. It's moving. When men stand up. By the way, as I was saying to some of our folks over there, it used to be 10 years ago if there was a business luncheon in some major metropolitan area and a waiter came up with a lisp and said, what would you like for an order? And one of the wise guys around the table said, well, let me tell you, and made fun of it. No one would say anything. Today, if that happened, they'd say, get the hell out of here. Because what's happened as we've liberated the movement to liberate the LGBT community, we've liberated a lot of straight people from knowing that they are not going to be the ones ostracized so long so many people thought they would be. Well, what this guy does, when you walk in and you get athletes to start talking about it, and by the way, the guy who sits there, the next guy, the 2 guys that call up know about this and says, man, I did this last night. I got some. Usually that's the guy who couldn't get a date on a bet and had basically no sex appeal. No, you think I'm kidding. Am I joking, guys? The guys who, hey, man, let me tell you what I did, man. Well, until we end the circumstance where it's appropriate to tell a joke about rape, to tell a joke about vulnerability, until that happens, we're not changing the culture. This guy walking into those locker rooms, this guy walking into those fraternities, trying to organize, you're making a difference, man. We owe you. Thank you. Now, the next guy is a little guy. He's significantly intimidated by men who might threaten him, but Cody McDavis. He played at the University of Northern Colorado, is now out. And this is the guy who was then and continues now, challenging athletes to step up and say something. As I go around the campus, I was Cody down at the Clemson University. They got a guy a little bit taller and about 30 pounds heavier, who's the captain of their football team, center. He's leading the effort on campus, making it clear this isn't about, trying to be, cool and, the in-house feminist. It's changing. We're changing attitudes. We want to thank you, man, for stepping up as you have. Sir. Lastly, but not the least, I want to say, let me say to, this is all about Cadet First Class for the United States Military Academy. Sir, get your rear end up here. I'm still your guy. I want you to meet Carson Warnberg, and he's taking the case to the academy. You all know there's much too much sexual assault in the United States military. I was just on a campus that is equally as consequential, he won't admit it, Annapolis, meeting for 4 hours with the cadets, the students, the midshipmen, I should say, at Annapolis. What's starting to happen now is they're not waiting for commanding officers to begin to change the culture. If you change the culture in the cadet corps, you have an exponentially greater opportunity to change the culture throughout the military. And by the way, I want to make it clear, and I'm not joking about this. A woman can do anything, anything, anything a man can do. I sat at my home honoring with my wife, who's involved with military families. We're a military family, with 2 women who just went through special forces training. You look at them; they look like 2 of the young women on our Olympic soccer team. They're attractive, polite, straightforward, look like ordinary people. But guess what? They went through Ranger School. Guess what? Back when I was a young senator, I got elected when I was 29, and it was only then that they start to allow the academies to accept women. I appointed women I was one of the first people to appoint women to all the academies. I was out in one of the great honors as vice president. I get to do, the president, I rotate commencements. And so I've now done every academy, and I'm going back this year, and I'm going to be up your way, old buddy, doing West Point's commencement. But I was out at the Air Force Academy 2 years ago, and they have an outfit that, John, what do you call those guys who fly those planes real quick? Where is, I was kidding the Colonel. Colonel, where are you? I guess he left. He's gone. Anyway, they have the Thunderbirds and the Blue Angels. Okay? Guess what? It takes enormous skill. So they wanted to meet me at the Air Force Academy because they do a flyover at graduation the night before. I'm meeting them all. Guess what? 2 of the pilots are women. My generic point is, we got to change the attitude in the military for a whole range of reasons, not the least of which is women are carrying a significant portion of the burden in protecting and securing our country. So folks, these are real champions. These are people that I'm honored to stand with. I hope you feel that way. And that's what It's on Us is all about. It means students, it means faculty, it means coaches, it means your college presidents, it means your deans, it means the law enforcement community on campus, it means the infirmary. It is on every one of us. And if we do just what constitutes being decent, we can change this culture. And my granddaughters are going to be all better for it because of you. Thank you all so very, very much.